Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today,
Mm.
we're diving into
Yes,
Yevgeny Zamyatin's We, a book that's both a thrilling read and a chilling glimpse into a possible future.
it is. And it's fascinating how this novel, written in the 1920s, foreshadowed so much of what we grapple with today: surveillance, data control, and this tension between individual freedom and societal order. It really makes you question what we're willing to sacrifice for that illusion of security.
Absolutely. And We Zamyatin throws us right into this world, the United States, where everything is regimented, from daily schedules to emotions. Our main character, D503, is a mathematician, working on a spaceship called the Integral, meant to spread this rigid ideology to other planets.
And D503, at first, is a complete believer in the system. He sees beauty in the cold logic of it all, comparing the tables that govern daily life to a perfectly synchronized mechanical ballet. But his entire world shifts when he encounters I-330.
I-330 is such a force. She's rebellious, passionate, and embodies everything the United States tries to suppress: freedom of thought, emotion, and even fashion. Their connection awakens something in D503, these forbidden desires, and a longing for something beyond the sterile world he knows.
What's interesting is how Zamyatin uses D503's transformation to explore those big themes: freedom versus control, the allure and danger of both. It makes you wonder, is a life without risk, without passion, really living? And if individuality is seen as a threat, what does that say about humanity?
It definitely raises some uncomfortable questions, especially as we watch D503 wrestle with his newfound feelings. He experiences love, jealousy, even rage, emotions he's been taught to see as flaws. It's like he's discovering a whole new dimension of existence, a world beyond logic and equations.
And that's where Zamyatin's background as a shipbuilder comes in. He uses these precise, almost mathematical metaphors to depict D503's internal struggle, for example. He talks about an irrational root growing inside him, something that could not be thought out. This perfectly captures the way emotions can disrupt our carefully constructed rational worlds.
Right. It's that clash between the calculated world of the United States and the messy, unpredictable realm of human emotions. And it's not just D503. We see this tension reflected in the society as a whole. They're terrified of anything that might upset their perfect order, even going so far as to build a green wall to separate themselves from the natural world.
The green wall is such a powerful image. It represents this deep fear of the unknown, the untamed, and the lengths to which they go to control not just their citizens, but even nature itself. Is chilling. Think about it. What does it say about a society that feels the need to wall itself off from anything that doesn't fit its narrow definition of order?
It's a pretty bleak picture, honestly. But within this sterile world, there's this spark of rebellion. We have the Mephi, this underground group fighting for freedom and a return to the natural world. I-330, of course, is at the heart of it.
The Mephi embodies this primal energy, this refusal to be completely controlled. They challenge the very foundation of the United States, arguing that a society without contrasts, without passion, is doomed to stagnate. They're willing to risk everything for a chance at true freedom, even their plan to hijack the Integral, meant to spread the United States ideology, becomes this act of defiance.
Their plan is so symbolic, isn't it? Like they're trying to reclaim the future itself from the state's grasp. And speaking of symbolism, Zamyatin is a master of it. He weaves these recurring images throughout the novel, like the ancient house and the square root of -1.
Absolutely. The ancient house, filled with relics from the past, represents everything the United States tries to erase: history, art, individual expression. It's a stark contrast to the sterile functional buildings of the United States. And the square root of -1, this impossible mathematical concept, becomes a symbol of the irrational, the emotional, those things that defy the state's logic.
Okay, so we've got this dystopian setting, a protagonist undergoing a massive internal shift, a rebel group fighting for freedom, and all these layers of symbolism. But how does Zamyatin actually structure the story to bring all these elements together?
The novel takes the form of D503's diary entries, giving us this intimate glimpse into his evolving thoughts and feelings. We see him start as this staunch defender of the United States, comparing their system to a perfectly efficient official railroad guide.
There's that passage early on where he describes machines as having a beauty of their own, because their movements are precise and predictable, unlike the insanity of thought. It's like he's trying to convince himself that this sterile world is actually beautiful, that emotions are a weakness.
Exactly, but then his encounter with I-330 throws a wrench into his carefully constructed world. Suddenly he's experiencing things that can't be explained by logic or equations.
Like when he hears the music of Scriabin, this wild, chaotic composer from the past, and it stirs something deep within him. He's confused and even scared by his reaction, because it goes against everything he's been taught. It's a pivotal moment in his transformation.
And from there, things just escalate. His encounters with I-330 in the ancient house, the execution of a dissident, the glimpse of life beyond the green wall, they all chip away at his certainty. Each experience forces him to confront the limitations of the state's logic and the seductive power of the unknown.
He's caught between two worlds, the familiar comfort of the United States and the exhilarating, yet terrifying, pull of freedom. And his internal struggle becomes a reflection of the larger conflict at the heart of the novel, the battle between control and freedom, between the individual and the collective.
And that's where we'll leave off for now. D503 is at a crossroads, and his choices will have a profound impact on both his own fate and the future of the United States. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve deeper into his journey and explore how the other characters in this complex world contribute to Zamyatin's chilling vision. So we left off with D503, kind of teetering on the edge of a complete worldview shift. It's like watching someone wake up from a dream, except in his case. The dream is the tightly controlled reality of the United States.
And this awakening really intensifies when I-330 reveals that she's part of the Mephi, that group fighting to dismantle the very system D503 believes in.
Yeah, his reaction is so telling. He can't even fathom a revolution against the United States. It shows how deeply ingrained their propaganda is. The idea that their revolution was the final one, the ultimate solution to humanity's problems.
But I-330 brilliantly challenges this notion. She asks him to name the last number, highlighting the absurdity of believing that any system, any ideology, is the end of history?
It's such a simple question, yet it completely dismantles D503's assumptions. And she goes further, talking about psychological entropy. The idea that a society without contrast, without difference, will eventually stagnate and die. The Mephi understand that change, even chaotic change, is necessary for growth and evolution.
And you can see how these ideas start to resonate with D503, even as he tries to cling to his old beliefs. Remember that scene where he impulsively throws himself in front of the guards to protect a woman who speaks out against the state? It's such a departure from his usual calculated behavior.
Exactly. It's a purely emotional act, driven by a sense of justice and empathy that he's only just beginning to understand. And it's fascinating how I-330 interprets this. She sees it as a sign that he's capable of breaking free from the state's conditioning.
But he's still so conflicted. He tries to rationalize his feelings for I-330, telling himself he's studying her like a specimen. But his emotions keep betraying him.
And this inner turmoil reaches a whole new level. When I-330 takes him beyond the green wall for the first time, it's like he's stepping onto another planet. He's overwhelmed by the sights, sounds, and sensations of the natural world, things he's only ever read about in ancient books.
Zamyatin's description of that scene is incredible. D503 talks about the sun as this accumulation of living fragments, and the trees as candles rising into the very sky. It's so vivid and evocative. You can almost feel his senses coming alive after a lifetime of being dulled by the sterile environment of the United States.
It's a sensory rebirth for him, and it's incredibly symbolic. Remember, the green wall represents the state's attempt to control not just its citizens, but nature itself. By venturing beyond the wall, D503 is symbolically stepping outside the boundaries of the state's control and reconnecting with something primal and untamed.
And it's not just the natural world that he encounters beyond the wall. He also meets the other Mephi, these individuals who have chosen to live outside the confines of the United States. They're described as being naked and covered in hair, a stark contrast to the uniformed citizens of the city.
The Mephi represent a return to a more natural, instinctual way of life. They embrace their emotions, their individuality, and their connection to the natural world. It's both alluring and frightening to D503, who's still deeply conditioned by the state's ideology.
It's like he's caught between these two opposing forces, this seductive pull of freedom and the ingrained fear of chaos. And this tension plays out in his relationships, too. He's drawn to I-330's passion and rebellion, but he's also still attached to O90, the woman who embodies the state's ideal citizen.
His relationship with O90 is fascinating, because it highlights how the state's control extends even to the most intimate aspects of life. Remember how she responds when he tells her about being assigned to I-330 as a sexual partner? She's completely unfazed, simply reminding him of their designated sex day.
It's heartbreaking, really. She's been so conditioned by the state that she can't even comprehend the concept of love or desire outside the prescribed norms.
And her pregnancy further emphasizes this. She sees it as the duty to the state, something to be managed and controlled, rather than a personal experience.
It really makes you question the true cost of order and efficiency. What are we losing when we sacrifice our individuality and our capacity for authentic emotional experience?
And Zamyatin doesn't shy away from exploring those darker aspects of control. The great operation. The procedure that removes the part of the brain responsible for imagination and emotion is a chilling example of how far the state is willing to go to maintain order.
It's like the ultimate form of dehumanization, turning people into obedient robots, incapable of independent thought or feeling. And what's so terrifying is that D503 initially embraces the idea of the operation. He sees it as a solution to the turmoil he's experiencing.
He even tries to convince I-330 to undergo the operation, arguing that it will bring them both happiness, but of course she refuses. She understands that true happiness can only come from embracing the full spectrum of human experience, even the painful parts.
Her defiance is so powerful. It highlights the fundamental clash between those who cling to control, like D503 and the state, and those who fight for freedom, like I-330 and the Mephi.
And this clash comes to a head on the Day of Unanimity, a ritualistic event meant to demonstrate the unity and conformity of the United States. But instead of the usual display of obedience, the Mephi launched their attack, disrupting the ceremony and revealing the cracks beneath the surface of this supposedly perfect society.
It's a chaotic and exhilarating scene, and D503 is caught right in the middle. He witnesses the mess's defiance, the state's brutal response, and the eruption of chaos as the Green Wall is destroyed, allowing the natural world to flood back into this city.
That destruction of the wall is incredibly symbolic. It represents the breaking of the state's control, a reminder that nature and human nature cannot be contained forever.
But even as the state's grip weakens, D503's internal struggle intensifies. He tries to escape with O90 and her unborn child, but he's torn by his feelings for I-330 and his fear of the consequences of defying the state.
He's a man caught in a web of his own making, unable to fully embrace either side of the conflict, and as the chaos mounts, and the state tightens its control through the great operation, D503 begins to break down.
He witnesses the capture and torture of I-330 and her fellow Mephi, and he's consumed by guilt and fear. He even betrays I-330 to the authorities, hoping to save himself in O90.
That betrayal is a turning point for him. It marks his complete surrender to the state's control. He's given up on the possibility of freedom, choosing instead the illusion of security offered by the great operation.
And in the final chapters, we see the full tragedy of his choice. He undergoes the operation and becomes a mere shell of his former self, a perfectly compliant citizen, stripped of his capacity for independent thought and emotion.
It's a chilling ending, and one that leaves us with so many questions about the nature of freedom, control, and the human spirit's ability to endure even in the face of overwhelming oppression.
Yeah, it's a bleak ending for D503, no doubt. But what struck me is how Zamyatin uses other characters to kind of show different facets of this struggle between individuality and the state. Like O90, you were saying how she embodies the ideal citizen, almost tragically so.
Yeah, her story is so powerful because it really makes you question what we lose when we prioritize order above all else. O90 is incapable of understanding D503's emotional turmoil. Even her pregnancy, a deeply personal experience for most, becomes this abstract duty to the state.
It's almost like she's been robbed of her humanity. Her inability to comprehend anything outside the state's logic makes her both a product of the system and a warning against it.
Exactly. And then you have R13, the poet. Initially, he comes across as this harmless, even comedic figure, but his role is much more complex. He embodies this paradox, how art and creativity can exist, even thrive, within a totalitarian regime.
Right, he writes poems praising the state, even one about the beauty of the death penalty. It's chilling how easily art can be twisted into a tool for control.
But there's this subtle subversion in his work, too. He seems aware on some level of the state's manipulation. It's like he's using poetry to resist, but in a coded way that most citizens wouldn't even pick up on.
It raises the question, can true art ever exist in a society that demands absolute conformity? Or does it inevitably become propaganda no matter the artist's intentions?
That's the tension Zamyatin explores so brilliantly. And R13's relationship with I-330 further complicates things. They're both drawn to art and freedom, but their approaches clash. R13 almost romanticizes the state, seeing it as this escape from the burden of choice, while I-330 believes true happiness lies in embracing that burden, in fighting for the right to choose.
And ultimately that difference leads to betrayal. R13 turns I-330 into the authorities. A heart-wrenching moment that shows how even shared ideals can fracture under pressure.
Yeah, it's a reminder that resistance isn't always straightforward, that even those fighting for a common cause can have vastly different methods, and sometimes those methods collide.
Then we have the ever-present figure of Fez, the state's enforcer. He's like a walking embodiment of surveillance, always watching, always in control.
He's terrifying, but also strangely compelling. He seems to understand D503's internal struggle. in a way that others don't. Remember that moment when he prevents D503's arrest early on? It seems like an act of kindness. But later we realize it's all part of his manipulation.
Exactly. He's playing a long game, ensuring D503 stays entangled in the web of the state. And that final revelation, that S was watching D503 even beyond the green wall, shows how pervasive the state's control truly is. There's no escape, not even in the supposed freedom of the natural world.
Zamyatin's portrayal of S highlights the insidious nature of power, how it can operate in subtle psychological ways, not just through brute force.
So we've got these intertwined journeys, D503's descent into conformity, O90's tragic obedience, R13's artistic struggle, and I330's unwavering fight for freedom, all playing out under the watchful eye of S. It's a bleak picture, but it's not without hope.
Right, even in this world of surveillance and control, there are glimmers of resistance, I330's defiance, the Methai's willingness to risk everything for their ideals. These are reminders that the human spirit can't be completely crushed.
We is a powerful cautionary tale, no doubt. But it's also a call to action, a reminder to be vigilant against those who seek to control our thoughts and actions, and to never stop fighting for individual freedom.
And that's the question Zamyatin leaves us with. What would you choose? A life of comfortable conformity, or a life of risky, messy freedom? It's a question that resonates just as strongly today as it did a century ago.
We is a book that will stay with you long after you finish reading it, prompting you to examine your own life, your own choices, and the world around you with a more critical eye. And that's the power of great literature. It challenges us, it provokes us, and it ultimately makes us more aware of the complexities of the human experience.
So if you haven't already, I highly recommend diving into We and grappling with Zamyatin's chilling vision. You might be surprised at how much it reflects our own world and how much it makes you think about the choices we make every day.
Until next time, on Books and Bytes, keep reading, keep questioning, and keep those minds engaged.